All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Debbie Rosen, and I'm going to go ahead and um, put something in the chat. So if you guys can hear me, okay. I know there's a bunch of people joining. So if you guys can hear me, okay, go ahead and put something in the chat over to the right. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning. Hi, everybody.
All right. And always count on Veronica. I haven't seen you lately at dance, Veronica, but I always see you here, which we're so happy about. And you finally get to meet my good friend Rachel, which is fantastic. Good morning, Michelle. Good morning, Kay, Kelsey, Karen. Got all the K's. Lindsay's there. Thank you, Lindsay, for letting us know we sound good. Oh, hi, Jen. So glad you're here with Rachel. Yay, we're all back together again. That's fantastic. So we're gonna, it's really clicking up quickly on the participants. So we're gonna go ahead and let everybody join and just give it one more minute. As everybody who has seen Rachel before knows, we're in for a really big treat. I was super excited when I woke up this morning, an hour of Rachel. I know why Jen's happy that she's here. I think everyone else is going to be after they hear everything you have to say. So it is 9:01, and I know that there's just a bunch of people still joining. I'll say this, and I'm sure people ask again in the chat. So I am Debbie Rosen. I am one of the owners of Study Pro. Lindsay's on the other end supporting us back in the background, Lindsay Toms. And we are the Study Pro. And so we will be recording this, and we will be sharing the recording. And we'll PDF the slides, and we'll share all of that on our website, and we'll send the link out right after. So I know that's a question that we get often. So I wanted to start with that. And I will quickly do a little bit of an overview for those of you who do not know the Study Pro. We are an executive function and study skills center. And as I always say, what that really means is that we focus on the process piece of school. So the content is the math, the science, the history, and often we think of tutors as something, as, you know, folks that help us when we don't understand the content side. And really, you know, executive function, study, or academic coaches are the folks that help us with these challenges that you see here on the right, that often really become inhibitors to our students doing, you know, as well as they are really hoping to do, and kind of representing the true knowledge that they have on the content area side. So we do a number of things to help. We look at executive functions and study skills as skills themselves. So they are possibly and probably underdeveloped skills. So a lot of the things that you're here to hear today, to understand and learn, are skills as well, parenting skills. So we have student skills, right? Things that are important to ensure that kids know how to do, that we teach in multiple ways, one-to-one coaching in our homework center, which is what I'm sitting in right now, through study skills courses, and writing as well, because writing is very process centric. We also sponsor for free every month during the school year informational sessions such as this, and knowledge sessions such as this, that really are focused on trying to help us all become better humans and better parents, and more confident in our abilities. And we also help, we also work very much around the concept of growth mindset. So the Saturday, I guess not this Saturday, tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, we have one of 3 workshops that we're holding between now and the end of the school year, all around growth mindset. These are for 4th and 5th graders, for the in-person growth mindset course workshop. We have a couple spots open for this, I think 4 or 5. And, you know, the students come in, and this one is around math, and we have one around writing, and one through pushing through frustration. So we hope that you can work with 5th grader. We even sneak sometimes 6th graders in there every once in a while, so you can reach out to us. And then we have 2 book talks coming up, actually. One in February with Dr. Christopher Henry. He goes by Hank Weisinger. And we are very excited about this coming one in February, where we're talking about how parents can really balance the idea of pushing our kids, but do it in a way that feels supportive and still helps to provide the guidance and I guess, and not really being pushy for parents. So it's really been well received. They've spoken at a lot of other schools and other parenting groups. So we're looking forward to that. And in terms of the one about writing, they're all on our website under the programs. There was a question in the chat. They're all on our website under the programs tab under growth mindset workshops. So I can also get that information after I'm done with my portion. And the growth mindset is for 4th and 5th graders, but our study skills courses, which this might be a little bit hard to read, are for 4th, 5th, 6th through 8th, and 9th through 12th. So I just wanted to share a few pieces of information about that as we're launching all of our study skills courses for 2022. Again, 4th, 5th, 6th through 8th, 9th through 12th. It really is focused on helping students understand that they have a role to play in school, that is not being, pulled by their teacher who's teaching, assigning, and assessing, but that they have an active role to play. And it really helps to define what their role is as a student. Everything from how to get started, how to plan, how to take notes, how to assess, self-assess, how to break down your work, and active studying are just some of the things that we focus on. So with that, I wanted to welcome our guest today, Rachel Bailey. So I like to talk about Rachel in more informal terms, just because she's been such an incredible help to myself and my family, and a number of people that have taken her parenting groups and have worked with her and are part of her community, which you can see right here. So she, of course, has a master's in clinical psychology, but she is really a parenting specialist that focuses very much, and she'll share more about this, but very much on what we can do and say, which I think is really important to us, to diffuse certain situations and really create a much happier and positive tone in our homes. So that's really what we're focused on today. I'm going to turn my slides down. Welcome, Rachel. I will stop sharing, let you share, and forward to hearing everything you have to say. Wonderful. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my mic off and my video for now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Debbie and Lindsay, for having me here. I'm excited to be back, specifically today to talk about how we can make small changes to help children with big emotions. So this is a topic, especially, I would say, pre-pandemic, I talked about this a lot, but I know emotions have become really big in so many homes. And even since I've spoken here last, I actually specialized my company, my business, in supporting parents with children with big emotions. So I'm very excited to talk about this topic. I am going to just tell you a little bit about me, a little bit more clinically about me, and then I'm going to get into what we're going to talk about today. But what I actually want to tell you is that my presentations tend to be a little bit interactive, so I hope that's okay with you all. What I want to do, as I'm telling you a little bit about me, is have you put in the chat box the ages of your kids. So I've gotten really good over the pandemic at looking at the chat and still talking. So even if I don't acknowledge your comment, I absolutely see it. And I would love to hear the ages of your children as I introduce myself. So wonderful. I'm seeing lots of different ages from 8 to 18, mostly adolescents here, which of course I expected. Excellent. So we have teens. We have a 1 and a 2. Excellent. Full age range. And this is what I love, because you know what? Big emotions happen at all ages, don't they? So keep it coming. Thank you very much. I'll just tell you again a little bit about me. So I have 2 kids myself. They are 9 and 11 years old. In addition to being a mom, I have a master's degree in clinical psychology. I've been in the field for about 17 years now. The first part of my career, I worked directly with, thank you for bringing these ages on. I love it. I love to see it. Thank you. I worked directly with children and adolescents in the beginning of my career. So I was an ADHD coach and executive functioning coach. I was what's called an intensive in-home mentor. So it's actually going into homes where kids were struggling and teens were struggling. And I was also trained as a therapist for, specifically my niche was in teenage girls. Although I helped kids, I helped teens, I helped adults, but I was really specifically helping teenage girls. So I worked in a number of different areas in the field of psychology, but about 13 or 14 years ago now, I actually stopped working with teens with kids and started working with parents. And at that time, not that many people were supporting parents. What was happening was there was a lot of support for the teens, for the kids, but not that many people were really giving these practical tools for what do I do when my child is melting down? Or what do I do when my child is resisting homework or sneaking out at night? Or, they're having problems with their friends. Like, what do I as a parent do? So I started working with parents, again, 13 or 14 years ago now, and I've been doing that ever since. And my goal is really to give parents, like Debbie was saying, the specific tools, what to say, what to do in the moment, but also, just as importantly, if not more importantly, how do we actually step back, be a little proactive, so we're not having so much of the reactivity, the power struggles, the drama in the moment. So I work with parents in a number of ways now. I do have a podcast called Your Parenting Long Game, which is over 100 episodes. They're short, they're very digestible, so definitely check that out if you're a podcast listener. I have been coaching with parents for many, many years, but these days, as I said, I just shifted fairly recently with the last year of supporting parents of children with big emotions. And what I find, and obviously if you are here, you probably do have a child with big emotions, but about 80% of families have at least one child. So what I want to do now, I'm going to ask you for another number. How many children, or actually I'm not even going to ask children, how many people in your family have big emotions? Include adults here. You might have one adult, one child, just say two. How many people in your family have big emotions? So I'm saying, yep, it's not even just one, right? Yeah, some ones, but some twos, some threes, some fours, all. Someone said all. Yeah, it's big emotions. What big emotions means. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But what I mean by big emotions is someone who feels things really strongly, who may have these big reactions at something small. Like if you have a child and you told them they couldn't go to their friend's house, reminded them they had a party this weekend, and they had this huge reaction. Kids and adults with big emotions tend to be a little bit controlling, a little less flexible. Maybe they have a little bit of anxiety, perhaps. This is what I mean by big emotions. You often see these big reactions to small things. It may seem out of the blue, although it's never really out of the blue. So that's what I mean by big emotions. So lots and lots of big emotions in your families. So these days, again, I do coach parents of children with big emotions. I'm a speaker, I'm a trainer. I speak at national conferences, all the things. But here's what I really want you to know about me is that, and yes, there tends to be an overlap between emotional dysregulation and ADHD. So those of you who have kids with a diagnosis of ADHD or not even a diagnosis may see this as well. So what I really want you to know about me, though, is that I am a highly sensitive person. Some of you may have heard that term before. I feel things very strongly. I internalize a lot. So I am a highly sensitive person. I'm raising two kids who are big feeling kids, big emotion kids. It comes out in such different ways, but both of my kids have big emotions. So 3 of us in my family. And this is one of the reasons I switched my focus, because I know there are unique challenges. In fact, I'm going to ask you a yes or no question. Have you found that some of the techniques that may work with other children, that you struggle for them to work with your big emotions child? So say yes if you notice that some of the techniques that are helpful with other kids are not working. So yes, if you see that. You can say no if you find, oh no, everything works the same. But yes, I'm saying lots of yeses here. I know the challenge is very unique, and that's why I decided to really focus on this, because I really know that, my gosh, if I didn't have the tools I did, my house would be chaotic all the time. And as a highly sensitive person, that would drive me crazy. So, all right, so let's move on. Keep those comments coming. I really want to see them. I love it. So in order to understand how to handle big emotions, in order to understand what changes you can make as a parent, you have to understand this concept of the yuck factor. And if anyone's heard me talk before, you've heard me talk about the yuck factor, because it plays such a huge role in behavior and moods and attitudes. So the yuck factor is a very simple concept that basically, when we are in a good place, when we feel good, we have positive behaviors, moods, and attitudes. As you know, let's say even as adults, if we're in a good place and our children do something frustrating, we can probably handle it in a way that we don't later regret. When we are in a good place, we are more calm, we are more patient, we're less reactive probably. This is also true of your child. When they're in a good place, they probably are more cooperative, they're happier, things are just going better. However, when we are in a place that I call yuck, now yuck is a blanket term I use to describe any type of discomfort. Could be that we're hungry, that we're tired, and we know that sensitive people are way more affected by their biological cues, by their hunger, by their tired. But it could also be, in addition to hungry or tired, we could feel disappointed or frustrated or annoyed or overwhelmed or stressed. Anything uncomfortable, I call yuck. So when we are in a place of yuck, we do not have positive behavior, moods, and attitudes. So I'm going to explain why, when we are in a place of yuck, our reactions are different. And in fact, I just want you to realize that our reactions really are different based on what's happening in the brain. So even imagine in your life, again, you're in a good mood. Your child does something frustrating. Maybe they say, oh, I don't want to do my homework. And you're in a good place, that probably doesn't elicit a big reaction in you. But if you're in a bad place and your child says, oh, I don't want to do my homework, your reaction is probably very different. Our behaviors, moods, and attitudes as humans have more to do with how we are doing inside than what's going on around us. And this is based on what's happening in the brain when we are in this place of yuck. So, very primitive picture of the brain here, but this will give you the idea of what I'm talking about. There is a part of the brain that allows us to be less reactive, a part of the brain that allows us to regulate ourselves and calm down, see the big picture, realize that having to do your homework isn't the worst thing in the world, or that your child complaining about homework isn't the worst thing in the world. This part of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex. Many of you, especially familiar with the Study Pro, are aware of the prefrontal cortex, and that this is really the part of the brain that helps us to have more mature behavior, moods, and attitudes. This is where our executive functioning skills live, so that we can control our impulses and regulate our emotions, put things into perspective, have empathy for other people, think of the big picture, solve problems. So that part of the brain, you all probably know, is not fully developed till the mid-20s. So this is why children, adolescents tend to be less mature, although I would argue that a lot of adults, we still struggle with this. But this part of the brain that really does lead to positive behavior, moods, and attitudes is not fully developed. Now, what you need to know, though, is that for people with, of any age, it doesn't matter how old we are, whether we have a fully developed prefrontal cortex or not, when we are in this place of yuck, and again, yuck could be that we're tired, that we're hungry, that we're frustrated, any type of discomfort. Our brain doesn't necessarily distinguish between types of discomfort, it just feels uncomfortable. So what happens is when it senses this yuck, this discomfort is a threat, it's a bad thing. So it turns on an alarm. That alarm is our fight or flight response. And what happens when we are in fight or flight, one of the first things our fight or flight response does is it shuts off access to parts of the brain and body that are unnecessary for survival. So it shuts off our access to our prefrontal cortex. So when we are in fight or flight, we are not mature and responsible and cooperative. What happens is we become impulsive and very, very self-centered. It happens to us as well. When I teach parents why their children are doing what they're doing, intellectually it makes sense. But when your child is complaining again, oh my gosh, I don't want to do homework. If you're in a bad place, you don't care about what they're going through. You just want them to stop complaining because they're complaining all the time. All we care about when we're in fight or flight is our own perspective. We become very controlling and irrational. So if you are yelling at your child because they just complained, and someone walks in the room and they say to you, hey, they just complain. Children complain. It's not a big deal. In that moment, when you're in fight or flight, you don't want to hear someone else telling you that, because all you can see is your own perspective, and it's not necessarily a big picture perspective. You're not rational in that moment. All you do is you see confirming data that shows why you are right. So what you'll think in that moment is, of course I need to yell at them because they're complaining, which usually leads to them not doing their homework, which leads to bad grades, which leads to them, not being able to get into the next class next year, which leads to them. I feel like everything ends up leading to them being on our couch when they're 30 years old, watching video games and eating pizza. And that's what we're thinking in that moment, because we can't access the big picture part of our brain. So here's another yes/no question. Can anyone relate to this? Yes, if you can relate to this. No, if you can't. But let me know if you can relate to what happens when you are in yuck. This is basically, yes, I'm seeing all the yeses now. This is basically the way it works in our brains. Now, what I do want to tell you is that people who are quote unquote more sensitive, those who have the big emotions, the big reactions, who tend to be less flexible, more controlling, we sense things more strongly. So our fight or flight response does kick in more quickly. It's not that we're actually more dramatic. I literally feel things stronger. And I know this because I'm a scientist at heart. I study this. And I literally do feel things more. Debbie said if I have no reaction, that's the right thing to do. We're going to be talking about that. we do feel things more strongly. Our fight or flight responses kick in more quickly. So those reactions are not necessarily disproportionate. They're proportionate to the way we're feeling. And I just want you to know that. People with big emotions have a more sensitive fight or flight response, but they also genuinely feel things more strongly and more quickly. So it's like we're more aware of potential threats, which I talk a lot about on my podcast. We're more aware of potential threats because we know the discomfort that may arise. So let's move on and talk about what I call yuck behaviors. Now, what usually happens when people are in yuck is one of three types of behaviors. I'm going to tell you all three behaviors, and then I'm going to ask you what you're seeing in your home or what you have seen in your home in the past. So these are the three types of behaviors you see when a human being is in yuck. First type of behavior is what I call yuck turned out. So someone's in yuck and it's like hot potato. I don't want to hold my yuck. I need to give it to you. I'm going to put all my yuck on you. So these big emotions tend to be, or even those who don't have big emotions, they still may do this, aggression. So especially with younger kids, if you had kids who pushed or hit or, did anything, biting, things like that, that's yuck turned out. Eventually, yuck turned out could also become, or even when younger ones have this, disrespect. I hate you. You're the worst parent ever. Or even, no, I'm not listening to what you say. That's their yuck inside turned out. It could also be blame. It's classic yuck turned out is you say to your child, why didn't you do your homework? And they say to you, well, why didn't you remind me earlier? And maybe you did remind them earlier, but they're in yuck and they're blaming someone else. Again, hot potato, don't want to hold on to this yuck. I'm going to put it on you. Control is another really, really significant way of seeing yuck turn out. And kids with big feelings tend to try to control because they easily feel out of control inside. They feel out of control with all these big things they feel. So they try to control their environment in an attempt to regulate how they're feeling inside. That's a big quality of yuck turned out. Next type of yuck behavior is what I call yuck turned in. So yuck turned in is really easy to spot when you have a child who says mean things about themselves. I'm stupid. I will never get this right. I have no friends. I'm ugly. All the things that they're saying, they're taking this yuck and they're turning it in on themselves. Yuck turned in can also be anxiety. I know as a clinician that when we hold feelings inside, it actually starts to look like anxiety. It's a built up pile of yuck inside. It could be low self-esteem, low motivation. When I was a therapist, especially for adolescents, I heard this all the time. I heard adolescents, teens say to me, you know what, Rachel, either I know I can't do it well, or it takes so much work to do something well that I'd rather not try. I'd rather not try and fail. I'm just not going to try at all. It feels better just not to try at all. That's all their yuck they have inside, and they have lost motivation because they're struggling inside. Now, the third type of behavior, once I put it up and tell you a little bit about it, you can start typing, what do you see in your home? You don't have to say anyone specific, but what type of yuck behavior do you see? So the third type of yuck behavior is what I call numbing yuck. So numbing yuck, we're basically a culture of yuck numbers. I'm going to be honest. We don't do a great job handling our yuck. It starts to build up, and so we numb. So turning towards sugar is really, really common. Electronics are not just common, I'll be honest, for teenagers or for younger kids. Adults, we do this too. We zone out on our Instagram, on our feeds, on the news, on sports. We are also numbing through electronics. Other compulsive behaviors. I know when I was a therapist for teens, I was seeing a lot of pot smoking, not surprisingly. And a lot of these teens were smoking pot because they couldn't handle their feelings and it sort of numbed them. So this is a very common. I would also argue that the busyness factor that is in, Northern Virginia and a lot of places, it's not just Northern Virginia, but then busyness is also a way to numb yuck. We have to be busy, or if we sit down, we're going to, feel all the feelings, and we don't want to do that. So we're seeing a lot of all threes, ones and threes. So someone said, I wonder how much of this is learned. I would say it is both. Some people have a tendency that's natural to them, but it's also learned. So it's both. It's definitely nature and nurture. Absolutely. So, yep, lots of what my little one starts to scream or yell or cry. Yep, absolutely. That's all this yuck turned out. Yep, lots of all threes. Excellent. So not that it's excellent that it's happening, but it's excellent that now you're seeing this. And what I really want you to take away, and this is why I say that this is a good thing, is because what you need to hear is that when someone is in yuck, they're going to have this yuck behavior. But this is the important piece. When you see the yuck behavior, you need to recognize that someone is struggling. we as parents tend to try to squash that yuck behavior. Don't yell at me. Don't talk to me like that. Don't say bad things about yourself. We tend to address the behavior, and that's why we don't see long-term change. We're not addressing the yuck that is causing the behavior. So the reason I'm glad you're all starting to see this is because I want you to start to recognize if you're seeing this behavior and you just focus on the behavior, you're missing out on a ton. You need to focus on what's under the behavior and the yuck. And we'll talk about how to do that. All right. So what we're going to do is move on to something that you probably see. And if you have questions, I see a question. If you don't mind saving that until the end, because that would get us very off track, but I will have time at the end to answer questions. All right. So what I want to talk about next is something you probably see in your home. This is especially true when you have one or more people with big emotions, because with people with big emotions, you see these yuck behaviors very large. The yelling, the blaming, the controlling, even the yuck turned in and the anxiety is very big. So here's what usually happens is your child has some sort of yuck behavior. Maybe they're telling you you're the worst parent ever. And what happens is their yuck behavior triggers your yuck behavior. So you hear you're the worst parent ever. That's a threat in your brain. You go into yuck and you say, you can't talk to me like that. That's so disrespectful. I'm taking away all of your devices. Your yuck behavior then, of course, puts them into yuck. So they start yelling more and they start, saying, I hate you. You can't take away my devices. Or I just did an episode on this too, where they say, fine, take away my devices. I don't care. That's actually yuck behavior too, by the way. They feel out of control. They're trying to get control back. So your yuck behavior creates more yuck behavior in them, which of course creates more yuck behavior in you, which creates more yuck behavior in them. Say yes if you recognize a cycle of yuck in your home. I would love to see. Yes, if you recognize this in your home. This is what's happening pretty much in every home in every home probably in America, honestly. Our yuck behavior triggers yuck behavior. Our children's yuck behavior triggers us. Yeah, I see it. And of course, yes, of course. So the cycle of yuck is happening. So what do we do about all this? I'm saying all the yeses, some with exclamation points, many, many exclamation points. Yes. So what do we do about this? Especially understanding that all that's happening right now is that we're just triggering cycles of yuck. So in order to understand what to do, I have to explain the yuck curve. The yuck curve is, again, this is all pretty simple, but the hard part is actually being able to implement it in the moment. And I'm going to talk to you about that. So this curve that you see is a rainbow-shaped curve, which basically represents what happens to yuck over time. So someone's in yuck, maybe you tell your child that they have to go to their grandmother's birthday party, they can't go to their friend's house. So they're in yuck. Their yuck is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It reaches a peak. This is the peak where you see the absolute worst behavior, although the behavior is bad all the way up here, but you see the absolute worst behavior. Eventually, though, this yuck curve comes down, at least the really immediate, huge emotions. It eventually comes down. Are there people who are in yuck a lot? Yes. And we could talk about that too. But this huge yuck curve eventually comes down. This may take, 30 minutes. It may take, I used to go into homes where it was taking 2 and 3 hours for someone to go all the way around the curve, but it does end. I actually used to teach a course in the physiology of emotions, which is pretty boring, but I will tell you that basically the science of emotions is they do eventually end, at least this acute type of emotion. So what you need to know about this yuck curve next is that when someone is on the curve, that is the yuck zone when you're seeing the yuck behaviors, the yuck turned out, the yuck turned in, or ideally you're seeing healthy coping. Basically, this is true of all of us. We're going to do something when we're on the yuck curve. Most of us, including us as parents, are doing the yuck turned out or the yuck turned in. Ideally, what we want is the healthy coping, but most of us aren't doing that. But that's possible too. It could be that we're traveling the curve without turning yuck out, without turning yuck in. So let me just remind you that when someone is in the yuck zone or they're on the curve, that's the language I use, they're on the curve, you will not see positive behavior, moods, and attitudes. It's not going to happen. We try in that moment to say, stop talking to me like that. They haven't gotten off the yuck curve. They're not going to stop talking to you like that. You're not going to see positive behavior, moods, and attitudes until someone has absolutely traveled the curve. But what happens is once they travel the curve, things shift. In fact, I'm going to ask you, what do you notice when your child gets out of this acute emotional state? What are they like after that? Not what you're like, because you probably feel like you've been run over by a bus. What are they like after they have traveled their curve? Go ahead and type that in the comments. Things change. They're just fine. Absolutely. Happy. Yep. Calm, happy, sweet. Absolutely. They want a hug, and you're like, are you kidding me? Because you haven't traveled your Yuck Curve yet. You're like, are you kidding me? I feel like I've been run over by a bus and you want me to hug you? They have unbelievable self-awareness and apologize. Absolutely. Like it never happened. Apologize is sweet. And self-loathing, that's important. Yeah. Kids do often feel bad about what they've done because they don't have control when they're on the Yuck Curve. Absolutely. Nice and complimentary, exhausted, because yeah, fight or flight response takes a lot of energy. Okay, so understanding the Yuck Curve is basically, you can keep typing. If you're typing, keep it coming. I want you to kind of get it out there, even if other people have said the same thing. Okay, someone said sullen and moody, and that usually comes from shame. If they're sullen and moody, they know they've done something that they shouldn't have done. They couldn't control it, and now they feel bad about themselves. That's usually where sullen and moody comes from. It's like an accumulation of yuck from having done that so many times. Okay, so question obviously becomes, well, how do we get them through the curve more quickly? How do we make this, how do we diffuse more quickly? Well, I will tell you this first, that what we usually do makes the Yuck Curve worse. It makes the duration longer, it makes the intensity higher, because when someone is in yuck, what makes things worse is a perceived threat. Obviously, this makes sense. They're in fight or flight. Fight or flight response is looking around to see, are things okay out there? Can I shut down? But if they're perceiving, and again, it's not what you're doing, it's their perception of what you're doing. So even if you're calm, a lot of big emotion kids and teens actually see your calm as a threat, believe it or not. So hear this. If you are calm and it's making them more frustrated, it's because what they're thinking is, you don't get how bad it is. So if they say to you, I have a test tomorrow, oh my gosh, I'm totally nervous. And you say, it's going to be fine. You studied for this test. What they think in that moment is not, oh, I need to calm down too. They think, oh my gosh, she doesn't get it or he doesn't get it. And it freaks them out more. So again, it's the perception of a threat. So it's their brain perceiving what's happening. Now, what ultimately calms us down, again, this is going to make logical sense, is a combination of safety and time. So safety is where the brain senses, you know what, there actually isn't a threat, I'm okay, or the threat isn't imminent, the threat is not immediate. And eventually it takes time, because the fight or flight response is a physiological change in the body, and it takes time for all of that everything that happens in your nervous system to shut down. So this is basically what you need to know. Now, kids and adults with big emotions go into yuck more quickly, for sure. They feel it more strongly. The height may be increased. But I will also tell you that people with big emotions also perceive this threat more strongly. For better or worse, I'm raising 2 kids with big emotions. I know they sense my energy. I know they do. I don't love that. I'm a highly sensitive person myself. I react quickly. So this is not easy for me. I'm not here in judgment of you. But there are also skills that I use that you can use as well. But they do perceive our energy much more strongly. Not your words, but your energy. So I think I see there's a question there. Again, if you don't mind bringing the questions to the end, otherwise I'll get us very off track. So I'm going to just ask questions at the end. I should have said that in the beginning. But definitely bring it back if I don't answer it. I'll also be probably answering some of your questions. All right, so we're understanding the Yuck Curve. So, okay, now what we're going to talk about is how to address the drama. How do we deal with this in the moment? And also, how do we foster resilience in the long run? Because you know what? I'm going to be honest, I'm not the best in the moment parent. I'm not so great at what I'm about to teach you. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, let's foster resilience in my kids to begin with, not only because I'm not so great at it, but because I want them to be able to go out in the world and not flip out. You can't do that in the real world. So we're going to talk about both pieces. But let's start with, what do you do in the moment? Now, I'm going to tell you what to do and say, but I want to tell you the 3 ironies of handling big emotions. And as I'm saying these ironies, you can even start after the first one. If you recognize any of this in yourself, write yes. You can do it at any time as I'm explaining the 3 ironies of big emotions. Here's what's ironic when you actually think about it. We expect our kids to be able to handle their emotions. They're frustrated because we just told them that they couldn't go to their friend's house. But we can't handle their emotions. So what happens is they get frustrated, and we get frustrated that they're frustrated. So it's so ironic that we're actually, yeah, Marty's seeing yeses, that we get frustrated with them because they can't handle their frustrated. Their lack of ability frustrates us. Irony, the next irony is that we expect them to be able to handle their emotions, but we can't handle our emotions. So we're frustrated because they got annoyed because we said they can't go to their friend's house, and we're frustrated, and we don't stay calm and recognize, hey, I'm frustrated. I need you to travel a curve and have healthy coping skills. We don't do that. We get frustrated and we're like, how dare you get annoyed? I told you 5 times you'd have to go to your grandmother's. I reminded you. So we get frustrated. We can't handle our own frustration. We have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. Those of you who are about 30 and older, you have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, yet we can't handle our emotions. So, yep, I'm saying yeses. This is ironic, and we're not thinking about it, but it's true. Lana, I am in this picture, and I don't like it. That's hilarious. Yeah, that's what happens. So, the last piece, the last irony, we expect them to act mature when things don't go the way they want, but we don't act mature when things don't go the way we want. And I'll just use another example. Let's say you imagine in your mind that you're going to get out of the house by 7:30, and you say to your kids, okay, we're going to get out by 7:30. You need to get your lunch ready, get dressed, brush your teeth, all that stuff. And you have in your mind, we're going to get out by 7:30. Well, they're not doing what you ask. They're not getting out. They're not brushing their teeth. They're dawdling. They're talking to each other. They're annoying each other. When things don't go the way we want in this scenario, we don't say, all right, what's going on here? Like, what's really happening? And maturely problem solve. We don't do that. We say, we have to leave by 7:30. What are you doing? We don't act mature when things don't go our way, yet we're asking our kids who don't have a fully developed brain to do the same thing. Okay, so hopefully you can see what's going on here, what the issue is. We honestly, if we want our kids to be able to do this, we have to be able to do this ourselves. Now let's talk about what this actually looks like in the moment. I know, ouch, I'm really sorry, but believe me, I'm sitting on the same chair as you all are. I'm not looking at you from above. I struggle with this too, although gotten much better at it. I teach all the tools that I use. That's why I love teaching in this, because I'm in it too. All right, so what do we actually do and say? Okay, so in the moment, what to do and say, I just want you to have a huge takeaway. Huge takeaway. What to do and say is all about reducing the threat. So I'm going to tell you what this looks like, but take this. In the moment, diffusing is about reducing the threat. So remember, you've seen this picture already. It's not a new one. What happens is if they perceive a threat, it's going to get worse. And they perceive energy. I mentioned this a little bit before. It's not your words that they hear, it's your energy that they sense, especially when you have big feeling kids. Although this is true of all kids. So it's reducing the threat. And the first thing you have to do is to reduce your own threat. You have to stop focusing on, you can't talk to me like that, or why are you having this big reaction? You have to tune into yourself and regulate yourself. And here's what you do, is you shift your attention from the thing that is the threat, which in that moment is your child. You shift your attention to safety. You shift your attention to something that's going to be safe. The reason you do this, and I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. The reason you do this is, number one, you're modeling what it looks like. Remember, that irony is they can't do this, but we want that, or we can't do this, but we want them to do it. We need to be able to model it. But more importantly to me, because they can't really see what you're doing in the moment, but they can sense you. So when you stop focusing on them and focus on yourself, you are actually telling their brain that they're safe. So you're reducing their perceived threat. So how do you do this? Literally, you focus, and this is what I do when I work with parents. This is what I do in my groups. I have parents identify the thing you're focusing your attention on. You're literally shifting your attention onto something that helps your brain recognize you're safe. So what are some things that help your brain? This may be a little small. I'm going to actually go through these. It could be a mantra. And what you're going to do is actually tune out what your child is doing, especially if it's something that's not safe. I have a whole other sort of thought about that. But most of you are dealing with kids who maybe they're just being disrespectful. It's not like they're hitting anybody, especially if you have older kids. A mantra. You stop focusing. You take your attention and you shift it. He's having a problem, not being a problem. Or this too shall pass. Or I need to reduce the threat. Or this is one I used in the past, and a couple parents have said they use this one a lot. Gotta be a model. So it sort of flows. Gotta be a model. Gotta be a model of what this looks like. Whatever it is. A mantra could be one thing. I personally use, and breathing, by the way, I don't have that on this slide because I feel like everybody knows about that. But the reason breathing works, deep breathing works, is because when you can take those deep cathartic breaths, it's a signal to your nervous system that there isn't actually a tiger chasing you in that moment. It actually tells your body you're safe, because you can't take those deep breaths if there's actually a tiger chasing you. All right, cognitive exercises. That's what I tend to use. So my go-to tends to be one of these two things. I go through the ABCs, skipping a letter. And when you do a cognitive exercise, it actually it really does bring your attention in, something that's slightly difficult. So I'll go like A, C, E, like skipping a letter, because that actually brings your brain back to, oh, you know what, I'm safe. Or another one, a rainbow search. It's really popular both with kids and adults, actually. A rainbow search is where you go around the room trying to find things that are the certain colors of the rainbow, find 3 red things, 3 orange things, 3 yellow things. Again, doing this re-centers your brain. It says, oh, you know what? I'm safe. If I can count colors and go through the alphabet, I'm okay. It actually helps you travel that curve more quickly. Or you can start to do this before you even enter the curve. It's even better. Some people need physical focuses. Walk to the furthest wall and back and do it 10 times and count while you're doing it. That will teach your body that you're safe. So motion, you may have heard this. If anyone's heard Kirk Martin, who I love, he says motion changes emotion. Anytime you move, it can actually help you travel the curve more quickly. All right, so this is for us. Yes, this is where we're regulating ourselves. That's the first step. We're reducing the threat to our child. Second step, and remember I said, I don't think any of this is easy. It's just what works. So that's why I'm going to tell you what to do more proactively. Second step though, is what do we do with them? Okay, I'm going to tell you, not much. They have to travel the curve before anything is going to be very helpful. How many of you have noticed, here's another yes or no question. You've noticed, say yes if this is true and you've noticed this, nothing helps in the moment. Nothing helps. You've tried everything. Nothing helps. So say yes if you've noticed this. Yes, I'm seeing yeses coming. Yep. Nothing helps. And that's because they're in the yuck zone. They're actually not focused so much on, what is my mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, what are they saying right now? Yeah, nothing is happening. They're not processing any of that. They're sensing the energy. So again, this is why you're regulating yourself. Now, what do you say? I'm a talker. It's hard for me to just not do anything. So I'm going to tell you what to say, but you want to say maybe one thing that shows that you are not against them. So let's say you told them they couldn't go to their friend's house because they had to go to grandma's party. You could say something like, you really don't want to go to this party. That's it. Or this party totally is like the last thing you want to do. Now, I need to emphasize this. That's not going to work. That's not going to get them out of yuck. That's really actually meant more for you than for them, to remind yourself that they're struggling. It can help you re-regulate and say, oh my gosh, they're struggling. They're on the yuck curve. I need to calm myself down. So you say one thing that shows that you're on their side. Please don't expect this to work. Not much works. What works is someone traveling that yuck curve. And I will also say this, our bodies are meant to travel the yuck curve. They're designed to travel the yuck curve. We stop our kids from traveling the yuck curve. We put a huge roadblock. When we say, don't talk to me like that, I can't believe you're doing this. No, we're not going to let them get away with it, but we're also not going to address it in the moment. It's not helpful. It doesn't work to address. They're not going to change. If your goal is to make them change, nothing you do is going to make them change. Let them travel the curve and their behavior changes. All right, 2 other quick things. Match their intensity. I talked about this a little bit more. When you are calm, that can be a threat because they feel like you don't get it. So instead of just, again, calmly saying, you know what, it really isn't, don't do that, because that makes it worse. Now, so a lot of parents will say, well, I've learned to be calm. The word I use is actually regulated. Regulated is what I was talking about up here. Make sure you're not in fight or flight. But once you're not in fight or flight, you actually can match their intensity and you can get into their world and think about what is it like from your child's perspective. So we are absolutely showing them that we get it in any way we can. It's through our energy, not our words. Then stop talking. Stop talking as much as you can. What I have to do, honestly, because I'm a talker, because I'm highly sensitive and I want to control, that's my personality, I have to sometimes bite my lips, literally, or squeeze my hands, remind myself, Rachel, don't say anything. I've often pictured my daughter crying, in my mind to remind me what happens, because whatever I say is going to be nasty and it's not going to go well. So we want to just continue to regulate ourselves, turn it in, go back to what you need to do to focus your attention on safety. You're reducing the threat for you. You're reducing the threat for them. I just have one more phrase you can use here. So let's say you told your child that their phone was taken away and you get, ah! You probably do if you say that. You can say one time and they cannot hear you. They cannot hear you when you say this. But just say, my taking away your phone ruins everything. Again, it's more for you than for them. Actually, someone just said, how do you match their intensity? I kind of gave a few examples. It's really in your voice, in the fact that you show you care. So I'll say this phrase by matching intensity. Calmly would be saying, my taking away your phone ruins everything. Matched intensity is, my taking away your phone ruins everything for you. Now, when you have a teen, you don't want to necessarily over exaggerate, like, cartoonish, but you absolutely want to let them know, I get that my taking away your phone ruins everything for you. So you're not like slowing down as much, but you are intense. You are not cartoonish, which actually works a little bit with younger kids. Teens don't respond to that. They respond to, though, it ruins everything for you. That's what they respond to. Okay, so let's move on. And I will tell you, the last part of this before we go into what to do proactively is your measure of success should be not, did they calm down? Did it go better? But did you regulate yourself? Did you make the cycle of yuck worse, or did you break the cycle? Because you can't control your child. You can try as hard as you want, but you can't control them. And if you actually control them, to me as a therapist, that's a red flag. I don't want you controlling your kids. You don't want to be controlling your kids. You need to focus on yourself. And I will also tell you, kids and teens with big emotions, they do ideally need to live in an environment where there's more regulation happening. Otherwise, their nervous system is supremely affected when it's not. So yes, does this come back to us a lot? It does, unfortunately. If you happen to be a sensitive person like me, you're like, oh, darn it, I hate that it comes back to us, but it kind of does. All right, so someone said, is that to try to empathize? Again, try to keep the questions to the end. I'll answer this one because it's super quick. It's to try to teach them they're safe. It reduces the threat. That's why we're doing this. That's the whole goal. Empathy sometimes makes someone feel safe. Sometimes it makes someone feel patronized. You need to just reduce the threat, whatever it takes. All right, let's move on. Okay, how do we reduce the drama to begin with? This is where I'm going to wrap up and then we'll move to questions. How do we reduce the drama? Because, hey, this is not so easy in the moment, especially, by the way, if you have a lot of yuck in your life. If you're stressed by work, by your activities, by all the things on your to-do list that you don't have time to do, this stuff's going to be much harder. So you know that already, but we don't want to have to do it in the moment all the time. How to reduce the drama. So fostering resilience is a topic that I talk about very frequently. I'm talking about it specifically in context of big emotion children for right now. I do entire workshops just on this, but I'm going to give you some high-level takeaways in how we foster resilience. So I will tell you this. Again, remember my last, in the moment, your takeaway was reduce the threat. That's your takeaway. Takeaway for fostering resilience is, if we want kids to be more resilient, we have to realize that their big emotions simply a sign that their yuck is bigger than their coping skills. So here's a visual for you, a little seesaw there. You want your child to be more resilient. It's not going to be with this seesaw. Big emotions happen when yuck is bigger than coping skills. When someone has really good coping skills, it actually doesn't matter how much yuck they have. They cope with it. But I will also say that some people have really good coping skills, but they just have too much yuck. It's like, I have really good coping skills, but this is just too much. That means we have to reduce the yuck. So imagine, big takeaway, yuck is bigger than coping skills. This is where you see yuck behaviors. So our goal is to change the angle of the seesaw so that someone's yuck is lower than their coping skills. Now, do we take away all yuck? Absolutely not. That is not resilience. Resilience means someone actually has to face discomfort. Someone has to be, dealing with challenges. We're reducing unnecessary yuck, and I'm going to tell you what that looks like. So basically, we're reducing unnecessary yuck, not all yuck, and we're increasing coping skills. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples on this. So what do I mean by reducing yuck? So I will tell you that one way, I have so many ways to reduce yuck, but one really common, really simple way, and I'm going to give you some simple strategies here. They're more complicated ones, but I'm going to give you simple strategies today, is to do what I call making deposits. So making deposits is not about being nice to your child. It's not even necessarily about spending more time with your child. Making deposits, the way I described, is a little bit more clinical than that. Because I will tell you that we have certain emotional needs. Clinically, as human beings, we have certain emotional needs. We have biological needs too. We also have emotional needs. And when these emotional needs are not met, our brain senses that as a type of discomfort or yuck. And so what basically happens is, there are 5 that you can see right there. And when our brain senses, you can think of these like accounts, like bank accounts. When our brain senses, and it's constantly trying to determine, if it senses there are more withdrawals than deposits from these accounts, someone's going to be in yuck. There are lots of withdrawals and not a lot of deposits for a lot of kids and a lot of adults. This is not just kids. So one of the ways we reduce yuck in children and teens is to make what I call deposits. So I'm giving you very simple ways to do this that aren't necessarily one-on-one time and being nice to them. These are deposits. These are clinical deposits that actually I'll tell you what account they're depositing into. So one example of a very quick deposit is to ask them what they care about. So what I want to talk about, what I want to actually ask you, as I go through these deposits, I'm going to eventually ask you what kinds of deposits you are making, but listen first to what I'm talking about by deposits, because again, it's not just about being nice. There are reasons I'm suggesting these specifically. One is asking them what they care about. We often ask them about things we care about. How was the homework? How'd you do on the test? Did you go talk to that friend that I told you not to talk to? We ask them about what we care about. We often ignore what they care about, or we minimize what they care about. So they're playing video games. We don't ask about them. But it's a huge, I even say if you get more bang for your buck, it's an even bigger deposit. If you ask them about something they care about that they know you don't care about, ask them about their video games. Or if they like magic tricks, but you could care less, ask them anyway. This is a deposit into both connection and significance. Significance is the need to know we matter. When you ask your child about something that matters to them that does not matter to you, you're basically saying, no, I don't care about your video game. I care about you. What level are you on? How do you play that? So that's an example of a deposit. It does not take very long. Another example of a deposit is to defer to them as an expert. So similarly to what I was saying, let's say they play video games. You could say something like, hey, I have a friend whose daughter also plays this video game. Can you tell me a little bit about it so I can tell my friend what to expect? Defer to them as an expert in the things they care about. This is a deposit into capability and control. This is showing them that you trust them, that even though you know they struggle in school, they struggle with homework, that you do trust them as an expert. So that's another example. So here's what I will say. By the time kids come to, or parents come to me, they're saying, Rachel, I tried this, it doesn't work. It does not work. They don't want to talk to me about their video games. In fact, if you're in that boat, say yes, if you're comfortable. You don't have to, but I just want people to see you're not alone in this. If you've tried to do this in your teen or your child is not listening, you're not alone. So hopefully you'll see some people saying yes. If people aren't saying yes, it's not because you're the only one, it's that people don't necessarily want to talk about it, but I promise you are not alone. So if you're doing this, if you haven't tried, try here, because it actually makes a big difference. But if you've tried and it doesn't work, micro deposits are the way to go. What are micro deposits? They're actually minier things you do, because if your child doesn't want to talk to you about what they care about, they don't want to help you as an expert, their yuck is even bigger than you can address in that by asking those questions. So we make what I call micro deposits. Micro deposits are really about your energy. They're not about what you say to them or try to elicit from them, because that's out of your control. It's about the way you approach them. It's about assuming best intentions. So let's say your child snuck their phone. They knew their phone was supposed to be in the basket at 11 o'clock. You've told them that. They snuck their phone. You've gotten angry, you've blown up. You go back to them later and you say, I thought about why you snuck your phone. You didn't want to disappoint your friends. You were in the middle of a Snapchat, you were doing a streak on Snapchat and you knew that you would disappoint them. I get it. You're not condoning their behavior, but in order to actually change their behavior, you have to make some micro deposits. Okay. Next type of micro deposit is notice your words and your energy when you or they walk in the room. Kids, especially big feeling kids, sense this. If they walk in the room and their hair is disheveled, they have stains on their shirt or something, they haven't put on deodorant that day, whatever, and you immediately are like, oh, again, they sense that. And this needs to shift. Honestly, a lot of kids don't feel safe enough to get to the point of deposits because of our energy in general when we approach them. Their brain is calculating, is this person safe or not? And honestly, often they feel unsafe. All right, so this is a way to reduce yuck. Last thing I want to teach you is how to teach coping skills. Teaching coping skills is the other piece of fostering resilience. And what we want to do is teach them to handle discomfort. Most human beings do not know how to handle discomfort. What we do is we go to the quickest thing that's going to make us feel better. So let's say even as adults, we're typing something, we get really bored, we go to YouTube ourselves even, because that's more comfortable than the thing we're doing. We do not know how to handle discomfort as a species very well. So How do we do this? Again, I have like 6-week courses just on this. I'll give you some high level. Teach the yuck curve. Your child needs to understand, and that's why I use the word yuck. I've been using this ever since I was in practice, because I could use this word with a 2-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 102-year-old. And yes, teens actually relate to this. I was a teenage therapist. They actually do relate to it. Don't use it like a silly word like yuck, but it's the yuck curve. This is when we are really frustrated or annoyed. Teach them what the yuck curve is, so they understand what's going on, because when they know that they have to actually get through the yuck curve before things are going to get better, that helps them feel less crazy. And big emotion kids often feel, and I use this as a word, they tell me, crazy. Why do I do these things? I get in trouble for it. Why do I keep doing it? Teach them the yuck curve. Help them make what I call when then statements. So we want them to realize, when I feel frustrated, then I will blank. We want to teach them. We can't just say, hey, when you're frustrated, stop doing that. We have to teach them to recognize their frustration, and we have to teach them what to do. And by the way, while I'm talking, if anyone wants to talk about deposits you're making, feel free to do that. If you're kind of getting a little antsy and you want to mention the deposits, feel free to do that, because I forgot to ask you to do that. Making a when-then statement. So when I have to put away the phone and I don't want to, I will play music, write a letter, work out. They need to know, A, when they feel uncomfortable, and B, exactly what to do. Will they do it just because they made one statement? Nope. Another part of handling discomfort is practicing this. Practicing it with your child, with your teen. Now, how do you practice with a teen? Practicing with a child is actually fairly simple. I'll tell you how to do this for those of you who have younger ones, and then I'll tell you what to do with the teen, because it's not going to work with teens. Practicing with a child is role plays. It's, talking about movies and shows and things like that, although that will work with the teen. Talking about movies and shows where people really didn't handle their yuck well, and having them be a judge. That will work with younger kids. That will work with older kids. I actually used to, this is dating me, but you'll see my age. I used to teach about American Idol. The judges sitting at the table at American Idol. I would say, you get to be the judge and tell that person how they can handle their emotions better. What could they do when they're on the yuck curve? It's much safer for someone to tell someone else what to do than to do it themselves. And here's what works with all ages, but definitely works with teens. Have them coach you, meaning they help you come up with a when-then statement. They help you practice it. You say to them, okay, can you remind me every night at dinner to say my when-then statement? That you're not telling them to do it, you're having them coach you. And interestingly, not surprisingly maybe, when they're coaching, it actually starts to work with them too. It starts to help them internalize these statements as well. All right, last skill I want to teach. I'm going to go through this quickly because I do want to be able to answer some questions. The last skill I will just at least mention, though, to reduce their yuck, to increase coping skills, is to teach them to solve problems. Teaching them the language of problem solving can be really helpful, because a lot of kids see problems as a threat, and so they go into yuck. Teaching them the language of problem solving, most kids and teens don't have. But here's what they need to know. What do I do, for example, when I'm too afraid to talk to my teacher? What do I do when my coach isn't playing me enough? They need the language of problem solving. If we want them to stop seeing problems as threats, we need to teach them. A really simple way to do this is to teach them most problems are solved by the phrases, can I please, or can you please? So if they're worried about talking to their teacher, can I please talk to you for a few minutes? Can you please help me with this? So the language of problem solving is really important to reduce the threat. So noticing when they're problem solving, here I'll tell you the older kid version, because this will work with younger kids too. If your children solve a problem, this is how you talk to teens. You say, hey, I noticed you solved that. I wouldn't have known how to do that. That was pretty cool. You zip your lips and you walk away. You notice with subtlety when they solve problems. You're reinforcing that. And lastly, also works with teens, works with younger kids as well. Let them solve your problems. Let them practice problem solving. You may say something like, and I've used this one, hey, I double booked myself today. I can't do that again. What could I do so that doesn't happen again? Have them solve your problems, much less threatening. All right, so I want to wrap up. I don't know if we have time for questions. I hope we do. I don't know if I didn't ask Debbie if there was a hard stop. But the last thing I will say before we get into questions is I do have a free mini training on raising children and teens with big emotions. I have a special version just for you for coming today to the Study Pro. The link is right there. I also have my podcast and Facebook group. I'm going to stop talking and turn it back over to Debbie to see what time we have.
You know what? We normally end at 10. However, in the past, we have stayed on for a few minutes if people would like to. So obviously, you can sign off if you'd like to at 10 o'clock or at any time that you need to. But certainly, if people want to stay and ask questions, it's up to you. I will repeat again because I saw the questions come in. We are recording this, and that will be provided in about an hour after the webinar. We'll send that out because you've registered, and the slides will be PDF'd, so you'll have access to both. So Rachel, so do you want to go ahead and, I know there were a bunch of questions that we had earlier. So if any of you that have asked questions and didn't get them answered wanted to ask them again. I know there was a question around the taking your phone away. Do you have to, Laura had asked, do you have to say something or is it better just to stay silent?
It's often better to stay silent, and I will just give you a quick tip. So, because I don't want to spend too long on each question, quick tip. If your child says, why aren't you talking? Because yeah, it often is better. Say something like, I'll talk when I have something that I feel is going to be valuable, or I don't have anything to say right now. I'm just right here with you. That's it. So yeah, it's usually better to be quiet. I know there's some questions coming in too. Do you want me to read those, Debbie?
Yeah. Well, I can. Meredith said, how do you distinguish between strong emotions and a person with a sensory integration issues? How do you distinguish between garden variety strong emotions and those that need professional help?
You actually don't need to distinguish. What I tell you works whether there's a sensory issue or not. What I will say about sensory issues is that you're going to have to work on this specifically to reduce yuck, but coping skills are going to be very, very similar. And it doesn't really matter. This is basically helping the nervous system, whether they have sensory processing issues or not.
And there was another question that Laura had asked earlier. What if the yuck is triggered by seeing the glass half empty, that kind of mentality, versus instead of seeing the glass half full, and how do you address the trigger?
I love that, because when we're talking about kids and teens with big emotions and adults with big emotions, we do, and I have this too, we have glass half empty mentality a lot of the time. And I'll tell you why that is. I know this firsthand, and I've been a therapist for enough kids and teens, because we know there could be discomfort down the road, and it's actually a protective mechanism. It's a coping strategy. If I am glass half empty, it reduces the potential feeling of disappointment later. That feeling I know is so big and so bad, I'd rather actually be glass half empty to protect myself. So what do we do about that? I would not ask your child to see the glass as half full. I would actually come at it as teaching, I teach something called useful versus non-useful thoughts, and teaching them how their thoughts affect their feelings. And saying, you know what, is this a useful thought? Does it help you? And in some cases, the answer is yes. And we just need to teach them, maybe when you feel that feeling, what do you want to do about it? Instead of like spewing negativity on other people, instead of spewing it on, turning it out, what do you want to do about that? So we can't always assume that kids need to or want to think positively. It doesn't really help all the time.
So there was a question about ADD and ODD kids and if it applies. I had answered on your behalf earlier that yes, it does apply. Specifically, it was the ADHD question. And then it goes on to say, what are your thoughts on ODD? Oppositional defiance disorder, for those who might not know that.
Yeah. So what are my thoughts? My thoughts are, to me, the diagnosis doesn't matter. There may be some tweaks we need to make given that a child has a tendency to be defiant. But to me, any child is having a problem, not being a problem. Defiant behavior, mood issues, attitude issues are a sign that a child is struggling. I don't care what their diagnosis is. I'm going to find out what is causing the struggle and how can we give them better coping skills.
Which kind of led to this question about what happens when the consequences like no sleepovers or no phone leads to threats of suicide. So I've experienced that myself.
Yeah. So the type of discipline that I teach, and my business practice used to be both discipline and big emotion. So I've taught discipline for 12, 13 years. The type of discipline I actually teach is it's not punishment-based discipline. So one of the reasons that punishment tends to lead to, and I can't say it leads directly to suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, because that would be unethical for me to say, but I will say this, that when we use the traditional strategies and we haven't taught kids how to cope better. So let's say we say, okay, you can't have your device for 3 days, but they don't, because you were disrespectful to me. They don't know how to be less disrespectful because they don't have great emotional regulation skills. what happens is they think, I'm getting my phone taken away. I don't know how to do anything different. The next time I'm still going to lose my cool because I don't know how to not lose my cool. What is wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why aren't other members of my family losing their cool? There's no hope. I'm helpless. That's what leads to the depression and the anxiety. So for me, it's not about saying I'm taking away your phone because you were disrespectful. I'm saying, hey, if you were disrespectful, we have got to understand you don't have these skills. We need to teach these skills. We still affirm boundaries. You can't be disrespectful, but instead of punishing you for it, your quote unquote punishment, and this is how I raise my kids, quite honestly, your punishment is we're going to keep working on these skills until something changes. That's your punishment. It's not about taking away anything.
So in the moment of yuck, when the child, and I skipped one, I'll go back to yours, Ella, but in the moment of yuck, when the child starts crying, how do we handle that in a way that we don't want to give into the crying, yet want to help them reach positive side of the curve or the other end of the curve?
So here's what I would say is why don't we want to let them cry? Crying is actually a great release of yuck. I didn't have it on my slides, but it's actually a really, really healthy release of yuck. Mm-hmm. We actually want to let them cry. Now, if they are crying, I had a daughter, honestly, who's still crying in like 4th and 5th grade at school. So, it's like, what do we do about that? We can still teach them the when then statement. When I'm in school and I feel sad, then I will blank. But very honestly, crying needs to happen. I told my daughter, when you come home, you need to cry. If you're not crying in school because the kids make fun of you, I want you to write it down and I want you to come home and I want you to cry because it's got to come out. So what I would say is let's not make our goal for them to stop crying. Let's make our goal for them to use these tears to actually travel the yuck curve. I think that answers the question.
And one thing that really helped me with a speaker that we're going to have later on in May, Nicole McGarry, when I was going through a lot of issues, she said to me one time, it's okay for our kids to sometimes not be happy. They don't have to be happy all the time. And I think that permission allowed me to be like, okay, it's not, they did something that was really not desirable. Sometimes they're not going to be happy.
They need to not be happy.
Promote that, but
yes,
because we all have to be we're all not happy sometimes. So also how to help when we don't ever see them come out of fight or flight. It just flares bigger and then goes back to smaller.
So this is a bigger issue if someone's in constant yuck. What that says to me as a clinician is that there is this concept of deposits. There's a lot of yuck. There are a lot more withdrawals than deposits. So we need to figure out what is causing, why is someone in a low level of yuck? Usually when someone is in that place, all 5 of those accounts have more withdrawals than deposits. And what do we do clinically? We start to make these deposits. We also do something I call yuck dumps. So again, there are lots of ways to reduce the yuck, but that is a symptom that someone has a lot of yuck inside and we need to start to reduce it. It's like a pressure cooker. It's building and building. We need to let some steam out.
So I'm supporting a mom who's an autistic son, 7 years old, frequently engaging in destructive behaviors, smashing things, etc., peeing on the floor. When mom is away and he is asking her if she's hungry when she returns home and sees all the mess, he's also laughing at her. She's trying to keep herself calm, but it's very hard. How can I support her?
So the key to
no, I'm sorry. He's engaging in constructive behaviors when mom is away.
Okay.
And then asking her if she's angry when she returns home and sees all the mess. Sorry.
So he's being destructive. Then mom comes home and he says, "Are you angry?
Are you angry?" And then he's also laughing at her, and she's trying to keep herself calm, but it's very hard.
Well, here's the thing: keeping calm. Here's the secret to keeping calm. I already mentioned it, but I'm going to say it again. Keeping calm is saying what's happening is not a threat. If you see that there's a threat, you're going to lose your cool. And this actually isn't a threat. It's so classic to me what's happening there. And this is one of the things I do with parents is I figure out, why is my child doing that? Why are they being so quote unquote disrespectful? That child wants to get a reaction out of the mom. They're either feeling out of control because mom left and there was nothing that child could do about it. So I'm feeling out of control and trying to get control back. So that's why I'm saying, are you angry? Did I have an impact? Do I have power over you? It's not a threat. This is what's happening. And she needs to see that. My child is having a problem, not being a problem. So that's really what's going on. Again, if we want to regulate, and to me, again, it's not just about calm. If we want to regulate, reduce the threat. And 100% of the time, we can reduce the threat. We can. So it's kind of a quick answer. And hopefully that was.
Yeah, and Monica, on our website, under the events page, there is a previous webinar by Dr. Bonnie Zucker, and I think you would really get a lot of answers from that as well. She was great, and I think the idea of his anxiety maybe leading to that is what she really addresses very, very much. Have you ever read the Love and Logic book?
Yes.
Thoughts?
I like parts of it. That's what I would say. There are things I don't necessarily agree with. Filling my tank because you did something wrong, I'm not a big fan of. To me, it's about if you did something wrong, let's figure out why you did it wrong instead of filling my tank because you did something wrong. But I do love their approach of it's really about your energy, really understanding what's going on for a child and being in their world. There's some parts of it I don't love personally, but hey, who loves everything that everyone says? I think parents need to do what resonates with them, to be honest.
Okay, and then the 5 accounts for deposits that you mentioned, and they'll also be in the PDF that we'll put out there.
I'll say them quickly, but they will be on the PDF. It's connection, significance, capability, control, and security.
And then a couple of questions about the mini training, the 6-week course. Is that the same thing as mini training? Or are you taking new clients?
Okay, so my situation is this mini training it's actually like bingeable. It's like 10 to 12 minute videos. There are 4 or 5 of them in a row. They talk about different aspects of raising kids with big emotions. And then once you watch that, there's actually a way to contact me to work with me. So I have a couple of ways. I'm going to be honest, my one-on-ones are full right now, but I do have a wait list and I do have a group starting very soon. So that's my current situation. But definitely watch the series. You can reach out to me on that. You can reach out.
And finally, we're going to end with the title of this webinar. Someone's asking is how small changes help children with big emotions. And I think that note, we have gone over by about 10 minutes and we still have 100 people on. So obviously a lot of interest in this. I would say personally, I will end just by saying that, as I said from the beginning, Rachel helped me so much with my own situation. And I was so quiet. I've been so quiet with my daughter when she's traveling the curve that one time when I was really upset, she literally came to me and said, "Mom, I'm just going to give you time the way you give me time because I know that helps me so much." So we're all here to say that this really, really works. And we very much appreciate it. And you are changing lives of many, Miss Bailey. We are so grateful for you. Thank you to everybody that came. We hope to see you next month and the next few months. And we hope you have a great rest of your day and weekend. Thanks again, Rachel.
Thank you for having me, truly. Thank you.
It was awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.